Cynthia. I think that's why we had such a huge sign up for tonight's NATS chat. But she has been a member of NATS since 1984, and she has been a private teacher and a university teacher 30 years. She is the co-author of the singing book, and
with,
she
I have to play with Mary Beth Dane. Got to stick that in.
Thank you. And associate editor for the Independent Voices of Internos, amongst many, many other things that most of you already know about. And her contributions to NATS has been significant. And for me, she was the first NATS chat host and started this whole thing back in the dark ages when we had to type things, and it was very, very different than now.
America Online. That's how old the original NATS chat was.
How long were you the host back then?
Oh, it seemed like a long, long time. I'd say at least 10 years. Yeah.
That's great.
And Matthew Hoke, and now you.
Yeah, now me. And we took it, my dear friend David Sabella drug and kicked me into the 21st century. And Scott McCoy, of course, his Inside View Press sponsorship. So, Nats Chatters, if this is your first chat with us, welcome. Please remember, this is your chat. We want you to ask questions. You can do it two ways. You can, there's a little button that will tell me that you want to ask a question up in the GoToWebinar control panel, and I can open your mic so that you can ask a question. Or there's a little virtual hand, and you click on that. Or sorry, that's how you tell me you want to ask a question, and I can open your mic. And then further down in the control panel, there's something that's called questions, and you simply type your question to me, and I'll read it at the appropriate time during the NATS chat. So I'll be eager to read all your questions and ask Cynthia. And there's none now. So Cynthia, let's you and I chat a little bit here at the beginning.
I wanted to start out first of all by thanking you all for being here. And I know I'm here on the West Coast. I just had dinner. Those of you who are on the East Coast might even be in your pajamas, and that's okay. But I wanted to welcome you, but also talk about how much the music studio business has changed in the last 35 years. And I was thinking back in the 1980s when I first started teaching. I was a graduate student. I was teaching out of my apartment, so there were a lot of challenges there. I was afraid that I would be bothering the neighbors, and I was scheduling lessons around my classes. It was pretty informal. I didn't even know what a spreadsheet was or QuickBooks or anything like that. It was pay as you go, which means that the student brought a check or sometimes cash every week, and then sometimes they forgot to bring a check, and then the next week they forgot, and then if the third week they didn't show up, I had just lost that money. So I was using my personal checking account, personal checks, but I got started teaching. Fast forward to the 1990s, I was teaching out of my home. At one time when I was teaching in upstate New York, I was the only voice teacher in town. I had 50 students, and I was teaching Monday through Friday. It was really too much. I learned that was more students than I really could effectively teach in a given week, and I have cut that way back. Since then, my maximum number of lessons per week, and I'm mostly talking half-an-hour lessons, so it wasn't like 50 hours I was teaching, but I prefer to teach about no more than 15 to 20 hours a week. I mean, 15 I should say at the most, with a student roster of around 30, and that is manageable, teaching 3 days a week. But back in the 1990s, at that point I did get a business checking account. Now remember, this is before 9/11. Before 9/11, you could walk into a bank, you could say, I'd like to open a business account, this is the name of my business. You know, Frank's French Fries, whatever your business is. And so I had checks that said Cynthia Vaughn Voice Studio, and that was a separate checking account from my personal account. So that was a step in the right direction. It was still pay as you go because that's all I was used to. I pay my teachers, you know, I'd write a check when I would go to my lesson. But the difference is that I was going into Manhattan and writing a rather large check for my voice lesson, and I was not charging anywhere near that amount for my high school students and church choir singers and the students that came to me. But I had a lot of checks, and I remember going into the bank one time because these checks would just like, I'd carry them in my purse, and I keep thinking, I have to go to the bank, I have to go to the bank, I have to go to the bank. Well, nowadays, if I do get checks, I can just take a picture with my smartphone and deposit it that way. I don't carry around checks. And I'm embarrassed to admit that one time I was giving away a purse to Goodwill, to charity, and I went through the lining and I found a voice lesson check from like 5 years before. So not a good way to do business. The other challenge about that time is that I had small children at home. So you would think if you're teaching out of your home, you don't have much overhead. But I had to have someone in my house to watch my children, and then I was always somewhat distracted because I could hear them. And little children, if they know that you're in the house, they know mommy's in the house, they will do everything they can to get your attention. And so that was a distraction. I had a chance to take a teaching job at the Arvada Center for the Arts and Humanities, which was close by to my house. The pay was literally half of what I was making teaching out of my home, but the luxury of mommy going to work when mommy was going to work was worth whatever it whatever it cost me. And I realized that it was a wonderful thing to be able to just show up and teach the students who'd registered and know that the Arvada Center was going to pay me whether those students showed up or not. And I really liked that, and I've remembered that as I've now moved into actually running my own multi-teacher studio. But I was still dealing with checks and cash in my private studio. So in the 2000s, after 9/11, as I mentioned, you could not get a business checking account unless you had actually registered an official business name with your state, with the IRS, and I had a very helpful banker who helped me set all that up. And so I say shortly after 9/11, I had my first corporation, and I believe the first corporation I had was a sole proprietorship. I currently have an S corporation and an LLC, and if you may have some questions about that, but it varies from state to state. At that time, I was done with dealing with the weekly checks, and I had a system, a voucher system, which actually worked very, very well. I didn't want to go to monthly payment, but I knew that I needed prepayment, and I created this voucher system where literally I would print out little pieces of paper, 3x5 card size. They looked cute, and I'd staple them together, and so students would pay for 4 lessons at a time. And when they came to their lesson, they tear off the voucher, give it to me. If it was time to renew, if I would say, oh, this is your last voucher, bring a check next time. My goal has always been to try to take very, very little time out of the teaching time, the lesson time, to deal with money. Sure. And even now, it'll be like, I'll send you an invoice, let's not talk about this during your lesson. Now, way fast forward to 2017, as I mentioned, I have an S corporation, I have an LLC. I love, love, love spreadsheets. Now I accept payments with credit card, PayPal. I could not do my business without Studio Helper. That's studio management software. Some of you I know use Music Teachers Helper. It's the same company. My music staff, I've heard good things about that company. I also have an accountant, and I have a cleaning lady. So big changes. And I really would say that I feel like I am operating my music studio as an artistic endeavor, but also very much as a small business.
I love that. So you just loaded us up with, I'm sure everybody got 1,000. And we talked about this the other day. I just want to say, for me, at the 30-minute lessons, to me, you spent so much energy. It's exhausting. So when I used to teach the middle school, high school, 45 minutes was what I lived at. Now all my lessons are an hour or 55 minutes.
You're working with professionals mostly.
Yeah, but even with the high school, junior high, but I think the difference is, like you said, you really, they walk in and it's, so what are you getting ready for? There's no, how was your day? Not that, and there's no judgment, good or bad, about that, but it allows you to do the 30 minutes.
Yeah, I can say hello and how are you as they're walking in the door, and I really find it helpful, particularly with I don't have junior high students, but I have a lot of high school students. And here's the thing, they are super, super busy people. So for the high school students to squeeze in that half an hour a week, you know, they're used to going, you know, boom, boom, boom. And so I will match that pace. And I find with high school students, when they walk in the door, I will say, you know, I don't say, so did you practice today? Did you keep your practice log? I just say, what are we working on today? What do you have coming up? Is there an audition? Are you trying out for a solo? Are you getting all the information you need for those college auditions? And we really kind of, you know, we get the hellos and how are yous out of the way pretty quickly. Usually as I'm ushering the previous student out, and we can get right to business.
Well, let me ask a couple questions, because I thought we'd start a different direction, but you brought up so many things. And let me also say to our NATS chatters, if you look under handouts, you'll see 2 incredible resources that Cynthia has been gracious enough to share with us. So you can click on those and print those out at your convenience, and maybe even look through it now, and it might facilitate questions. My first question is with payment. I am still check and cash.
Okay.
I know, and I tried an app at one point, and then they started charging me, and that annoyed me, and same with PayPal. Michelle DeVoe writes Venmo, and I think that's an app. They do not charge you to use that, or do you know, Cynthia, is that one you use?
I have a Venmo account. I rarely use it. I also have a Square account that I rarely use. I use PayPal, even though it's a little bit more expensive. But this is something to consider. I write this in big letters if you're taking notes. Business expenses.
Yes,
every penny that PayPal takes out of the payments I receive, and which to me it's worth it for convenience, but every penny of that is a business deduction.
How is that? That's interesting. How do you? Because to me, then it's another place where I would have to go see who paid. I mean, it's, to me, the way I do my spreadsheet and my banking, that would add an extra thing for me.
Well, PayPal will send you, or you can go onto PayPal at the end of the year, and I think Square is probably the same way, and you can get an end of year statement. I'm not calculating, oh my gosh, no, I'm not calculating what all those fees are. I just get a statement from PayPal that says you paid us, you know, X amount of money, and then that I just give that to my accountant, and that is one of my business expenses.
Okay. You know, somebody, sorry, we have to pause. Somebody has just said, no, they can't. All right. Sorry, Susan, you're saying that this is all muted, and it says that it's muted by the organizer, but everybody else can hear me because I'm getting questions. So
maybe it just means that Susan is muted, because that confused me one of the first chats I did, and it meant that I was muted.
Yeah, and we have muted all of them, and then on purpose. So, but you should still be able to hear us. You can't talk with us, Susan. You can send a question to me, or raise your hand, and I'll open your mic. So sorry if that wasn't clear. And let me do somebody, because Michelle so graciously told us about Venmo. No, they don't. They are a subsidiary of PayPal.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, they are.
Okay, so
people use Venmo when they're out having pizza and beer with their friends, and the restaurant won't split the check, and that's a way for someone to pay, but to tell all of their buddies, okay, you send me, you know, $4.33 through Venmo. So for me, it was too casual for what I was doing, and just for me personally, PayPal is integrated with Music Teachers Helper and Video Helper. So for me, it actually is easier because it's not an extra step. It's integrated with the software.
And so since we're on this, Cynthia says that Cynthia Romoff says Venmo charges a small fee to those using credit cards, but only to the payer, not the payee. It's a social media constructed branch of PayPal. I only use it with people who request it. See, I love this.
I won't use it unless it's really requested.
Okay. You know, when I go out and teach these how to run a business too, I'm like, listen, if I were a young teacher, I'd be using Studio Helpers or Music Teachers Helpers. But I'm too old now. I've got my ways. It works. I don't want to learn and pay for a new system. But I think that those are wonderful.
But I'll tell you one reason why I need to have something at that level, When I mentioned that I like to keep my student load at no more than about 30 students. But now I'm running a studio where I have, even my Richland, Washington studio, I have 5 other teachers. So we have more than 100 students coming into the studio every week. And so I just need a way to stay on top of that. And I definitely do not want 100 students a week paying by check or cash.
Right. Okay. And I know Shannon says, Shannon Coates, I know teachers who charge a convenience fee of $5 per payment to cover the PayPal. So I don't know, do you do a convenience fee of any sorts? Yeah. So
I just raise my rates every so often, and I just figure that's covered in the tuition rate, in the lesson rate.
Okay. So I would love it if anybody else, since we're on the payment type business aspect before, I think we should move forward, but if anyone, if you have any other thoughts, let's just cover that while we're here. And I love that what you told us about studio helpers has PayPal integrated, so that's incredible.
For individual studios, the product, it's the same company. It's Music Teachers Helper. That's for one teacher, one studio. Studio Helper is for one. It's for multiple teachers in one studio.
Okay. We're getting lots of people telling us how they handle it, which is great.
I'd love to hear some of those ideas.
Yeah, let me just run through them.
I was going to say, the reason I created that first handout is that I often get asked to go to colleges and talk to pedagogy classes, because the university teachers, for the most part, have not been teaching music lessons as a business. They haven't been teaching private lessons. Now I know, Cara, you are a big exception to that rule. As I understand, your independent studio is just as large as your university studio. And as you say, you've got your way, and that works. But most of the university teachers, the college teaching is their full-time job, and if they are teaching lessons on the side, it can be, pretty informal.
Yeah, no, I'm a full-time faculty member, and my home studio is bigger than my university, even though I'm full-time with all the job. Yeah, blah blah blah. But let me just run through, because we don't want to go there. We don't want to go there. But really quickly on this, somebody, Bruce says, I accept e-transfers direct to my bank rather than checks, so that's one idea. Arliss tells us I use Square because they have a simple way to create invoices. So this is some great information from others. And then somebody, Shannon says, my music studio is also excellent. My music studio must be a...
I haven't heard of that one. I'll add that to the resource list. I've just heard of My Music Staff and Music Teachers Helper, so thank you, Shannon.
And then Teresa asks about Google Wallet can be used. Has anyone ever used this? Do you know anything about it?
Not in my studio. I'm aware of it, but I haven't used it. I have occasionally used Chase Quick Pay if the student has an account through Clear Exchange. There are ways that you can do that. And some students pay by check, but they do it through their online bill paying. And so I'll actually get a paper check in the mail.
Oh, and sorry, it's My Music Staff, not My Music Staff.
My Music Staff. Yes, I've been hearing very good things about that.
All right, so let's leave that, Cynthia, because Elizabeth Yoder has beautifully led us to the next one. How do you market yourself and find students in a saturated market? How do you price yourself? I have a doctorate, but I live in New York City. Thank you, Elizabeth. Great question.
It's definitely more challenging when you live in a city where there are a lot of voice teachers. And I'm in Tri-Cities, Washington. There are, I would say, maybe 5 or 6 voice teachers, with master's degrees or higher, when I came here, I actually knew 2 of the teachers. I'll give them a shout out, Molly Holleran and Reg Unterseyer, and I knew them through NATS, and they had packed studios. They were full. They're like, oh my gosh, we're so glad you're here. We need someone to refer students to. So I walked into a pretty ideal situation. I've lived other places. I would say in Fort Collins, Colorado, northern Colorado, there are quite a few really fine voice teachers. If you want to refer to at some point to that the sheet, that first handout I had, I think that's where you start with asking those those questions in the left column. Why am I teaching? Who am I going to teach? When will I teach, and where will I teach? And I think that who question will set you up to answer a lot of the other questions. For example, if you are in a market where it seems completely saturated, so I'm going to just take a leap here. So if you're teaching in New York, you might have a lot of actors and dancers that are coming to you for lessons, and that market is pretty saturated. But maybe in the area where you're teaching, maybe there are not so many teachers teaching recreational adult students. I had a good friend of mine, Stephanie Samaras, who teaches in New York, and she did teach in New York, and at one point a while ago, I had actually been thinking about doing some teaching in New York and taking an interim year, and she had made a comment, well, there's plenty of opportunities if you're willing to teach amateurs. And my response to her is, I love teaching amateurs. That is the direction that I want to go. It may be in your neighborhood that there are a lot of teachers who are teaching junior high and high school students, and you don't want to shut out that market, but maybe you can find the niche market in your area. And so now beyond that, find out what the going rate is. My advice is find out what the going rate is, and don't try to be the cheapest. Do not try to be the Walmart of the voice studios. You want to be, the Nordstroms or whatever. I've had very good luck with studios when I've started new studios, finding out what the highest going rate was, and either matching that or maybe being slightly below. But I would rather, even if initially you've got fewer students coming in, I feel like there are going to be some students, especially when you get into the recreational adult student population. If you're cheap, that means you're no good. These are adults with careers and jobs, and they finally have carved out enough time to take music lessons. They want to find the best. And so they're going to look, they're not looking on the discount rack. They want to find out really who's charging the most, which, as we know, that is not an indicator of who the best teachers are. But if that's something they believe, I'm fine with that. Mm-hmm. I do reach out to the high schools if here in the area. I don't give free lessons. I don't give free sample lessons. I know some of you do, and that's great. But what I do is free workshops. Free workshops for the choir directors, and they are so grateful to have someone come in and do a pre-festival mock audition, just do a little master class with their students. I've gotten a lot of high school students from doing that, and I make sure that I'm not really overtly selling. I'm just there as an expert to help the teacher. But if they ask about lessons, I do happen to have some cards and flyers.
Right. And I'll add two thoughts. I always tell, I have a lot of young professional singers who are starting studios, and the churches, I think, is a great place. And I always talk about the avocational students are really wonderful for all the reasons you.
They're so faithful. If you get an adult student who loves their lessons, they will never leave.
And they devour. If you recommend a pedagogy book, they absolutely devour it. But the one piece of advice I always give is if you go into a high school or a junior high, go in with a sheet of paper with name, email, parents' email, phone number, and send that around the room, and you will leave with a full studio. I mean, literally, I did that many times if I moved or something. And
That's a great idea, and I guess I haven't been that overt about it, but I mean, it's still volunteer. You're not saying you have to give us this information.
No, it's like if you want your parents to communicate with me about either group or private. I mean, I don't do this anymore, but back in the day, about group or private lessons. But if I just left a flyer, it would get into their book bag, and I maybe wouldn't hear from them. But if they signed a sheet of paper that then I could communicate, I always collected a lot of students that way.
Yeah, I have. Who was the person who was asking the question about the attracting new students?
I'm clear enough.
So I had a thought that you need to find ways that you can stand out from the crowd. And one of the ways that I've done that, especially here starting a new studio just 2 years ago in Richland, Washington, is through selective advertising. We have a publication here called The Entertainer. So it comes out once a month, and it is all of the concert shows, plays. It's all about finding things to do and where to go, and it's everything from high school musicals to community theater to touring bands. And so that particular publication, if I and I will tell you, I will pay $330 for a quarter-page ad, and they throw in with that quarter-page ad, it includes a quarter-page article. And I was surprised because the editor said most of the people who advertise at that level, they don't want the article. They don't want to write an article. And I'm like, heck yeah, I will write you a quarter-page, third-person article that just looks like a newspaper article, and it's on the same page with the ad. I got a lot of visibility that way, got a lot of inquiries, and what that directly led to, which is even better, the regional business journal, I think Tri-Cities Regional Business Journal. Someone had seen the article, the paid ad article that I did, but they had contacted me and wanted to come do a feature article on my business. That came out in January of 2015, and by the end of February, I had so many students. And that was the recreational adult students. These were people who, it's because all of a sudden I had credibility. I was in, oh, you're in the business of the Journal of Business. You must know what you're doing, And it's just not a place that business people would expect to see an article on a music studio.
I think it's fair, the NATS chatters wouldn't know this, but Cynthia lives in my hometown where I was born and raised. So I know that community incredibly well. And I think it's very different, a community like that versus somebody in New York or where I am in Seattle. And so I think those are definitely considerations that we would take into account.
And be selective if so the Entertainer is a free paper. There are a lot of free papers that are just, the ones with the sex ads on the back cover. Those are not the ones that I am going to be advertising in. Well, my daughter's out there listening to this chat. I probably just made her blush. So be selective, but it's one way.
And somebody has added, Teresa's added, to find recreational, or I call them avocational, by the way. I don't like amateur for sure, but I always used to call them avocational.
The industry term through NAM, I know, is recreational, RMM, recreational music making. So that's one of those industry terms.
Got it.
RMM.
Okay. So to find the recreational adult students, find local amateur choirs and advertise in their programs. Do the same.
Absolutely.
With school choral programs. So
that's a great idea, and that's on my second handout about business strategies. And those kind of programs those kind of ads don't cost very much, and it's for such a good cause. So whenever possible, if I've got students or chorus singers, in my studio, I will do an ad just to support the organizations and the schools.
Gosh, we're getting lots of questions and comments now, so we'll move through. But I would like to say, I mean, obviously by these comments and questions, I'm not giving all of them to you because some of them are lengthy comments versus a question. Sure. But
now, is there a way later that I could access some of those lengthy questions and maybe respond personally? I don't know if you.
No. I'm so sorry. I delete as we go along.
So if you had one of those questions that we didn't get to, please email Cynthia Vaughn, VAUGHN, at mac.com.
And I am getting all the questions, Cynthia. Sometimes it's just their comments, that they're sharing their experience, which is so wonderful, but we're just limited with time. So let's move, because I saw some interesting questions. Let's stick with this a little one. This is from Randy Wooding. Any tips of those of us classified as contractors working for multi-teacher studios? You mentioned keeping receipts for tax deductions. Any other tips?
I would say, first of all, just this sounds terrible, but find a boss like me. I mean, the teachers that teach at my studio are independent contractors. I'm attending a business course now, and the teacher said, oh, they are your key partners, which is business speak, but they really are my key partners. I couldn't do what I do without them. So I feel a great responsibility to the independent contractor teachers that work in my studio. You're not always going to have that situation, and you are going to have studios that will take advantage of you, and so just be selective, but yeah, keep records. You are going to have, if you're an independent contractor, and it varies from state to state how all of that works, but you will be filing your own taxes, and the taxes will have to come out of the amount that you are paid by the studio. So you want to have as many deductions as you can. If you can deduct business to business, if you're driving from your home studio to the outside studio, that mileage is deductible. Every single songbook I purchase or download is a tax deduction. When I buy a ticket to go see one of my students in a show, it may be a $12 ticket to the local high school. That is, I use my debit card for my business card. If I take one of the teachers out to lunch, I use that debit card from my business. So just sit. I'm terrible at saving receipts, but that's why I use my business debit card, because I'm not going to use that card for anything that's not a business deduction. So then at tax time, and I'm preparing things for the accountant, I don't have a big box of receipts, but I will go through my bank statement and just verify that everything there was a legitimate business expense.
And I see, I do my own taxes through TurboTax, and I've got it down. I've got it down to such a system that I have spreadsheets.
I'm impressed.
Yeah, I have it. The spreadsheets are already itemized for me, so that it's really easy. If I buy ink for my printer, it goes right. I put it on the spreadsheet and da-da-da. So I like it because it helps me to know how to manage my business a little bit differently. So, all right, I love this question from Anne Miranchik. I'm so sorry if I butcher your names. Please forgive me. I agree with not discounting as a rule, but do you do scholarships or sliding scale for some students? I'll be so curious for your answer on this.
Yes, I don't make that information publicly available, but absolutely over the years, I have one student right now that I am offering lessons at a lower rate, and it's just that particular student, that her particular family situation, and I just really want to do what I can. And yeah, I definitely do.
I think when you've been taken advantage of, and again, I live in such an affluent area, and so for me, it's like if people come walking in with their $6 Starbucks coffee, they're on, right? It's like, how do you? It's tricky to do that.
But the other thing you can do is refer them to some scholarship resources in the community. There was a school near where I taught in Colorado, and they had a very active booster club. And once I found out that they would offer scholarships for students to take private lessons, I made sure that all of my students who were at that school and were interested just fill out the information, and the booster club would have me sign a paper just verifying that they were taking the lessons and that it was all legit, and then the booster club would pay me directly, and so the student did not have to pay for the lesson. The Rotary Club offers different kinds of scholarships. There are ways in the community that you can get that. I had a student recently contact me. She is in the military, and she's a nurse, and she is not on active duty right now, but she's taking nursing classes, and she said, I really want to get back to my singing. Do you offer a military discount? And I said, I never have, but yes, I will. And I discounted her lessons 20% just because it seemed like the right thing to do.
That's so nice. All right, Cynthia, we're going to pound through some questions here, all right? Because there's some great ones coming in. What do you recommend? And they're going to be all over the place now, so we're not going to be as structured.
My brain, as you can tell, my brain works like that too, so this is good.
What do you recommend as the best ways to purchase music for students?
Love that question. I don't. I tell them where to find the music. Yeah. See, it's so easy to download music, and I wish I had back the thousands and thousands of dollars worth of music that I loaned students over the years, who I'm sure this nice student would return it. So I really try not to loan music. We'll use my score in the lesson, and I'll say, we actually have 2 brick-and-mortar sheet music stores in Richland, Washington, which is crazy. Most of you do not have brick-and-mortar music stores. You go to classicalvocalrep.com. That's Glendower Jones. For all of your classical stuff. You can really get virtually any print. Any of the Hal Leonard and the Alfred books. You can get anything from Glendower. Yes, I'm sorry, Glendower, I do sometimes order music from Amazon. And lately, I've been finding out that I can download some of the Hal Leonard books are available on Kindle or iBooks. So I'm starting to get more of the actual print publications on my iPad. I have the fabulous big giant iPad Pro, which is the same size as a songbook.
Yeah.
But no, I do not buy music for students. I tell them what to buy, and I also don't make photocopies. There is no photocopy in my studio.
Great.
I just feel like that's one thing we can teach students, to be responsible and support the industry and support the publishers.
Absolutely.
It's not that expensive. 26 million songs and arias, I think now is up to $14.99.
I paid $6.95 back in the day. I think it still has that on there. Okay, Queen Barnum wants to know, how do you handle having a waiting list? I love this.
My solution here is I hire another voice teacher, and I just did. I just contracted another voice teacher who will be able to teach Friday afternoons and all day on Saturday. But until then, Emily Brown and I are full at the studio here, and I just kept a short list and also referred them to some of my colleagues in the area, knowing full well that they're also full. It's a good problem to have when you're in a market where you have something special to offer, where there are not dozens and dozens of teachers.
Yeah, and Amanda Mutton also asked that, and I have a waiting list. It's constant, and so I think I had 5 people cancel over the weekend for tomorrow, but it's filled already, and with people still waiting. And so I can literally at 10 a.m. on a Monday say, my 3 o'clock just canceled. Do you want the time? And it's filled. So people really hop on it once you've built that studio. So I definitely tell people on my waiting list that they will not sit there forever. They will not just sit there. That somehow they will get
high schoolers, right? If you teach high schoolers, you have this built-in turnover. Like any given year, you're going to have seniors who are graduating. And so I tell students that, okay, I'm going to have some openings after graduation. I advise that you start lessons during the summer, because by fall, those spots will be full.
And also, if you have a lot of junior high or younger, maybe a group, putting them in groups of 4, building a group lesson in where you actually make more money in less time, and it's a lower key way for them to try lessons. They all get the fundamentals of singing in a less
social aspect too. I've done that with voice classes for adults as well. If I had time right now, if I felt I could carve out an evening where I could do an hour and a half weekly voice class for adults, I would do that. It's so much fun, and you are bringing in that, you're bringing in more money.
Mm-hmm. All right, Michelle, excuse me. What questions do you ask an accountant to make sure they understand working with a teaching artist, as in those of us who teach and make money performing? Great question, because they don't get it. I find most accountants don't.
I have my business set up, so it's Magnolia Music Studio, but it's listed with the IRS, it's in the Department of Revenue, as music instruction lessons and music services. So I don't remember who gave me those 2 magic words, music services. That is anything. If I sing for a memorial service, if I get my book royalties from the singing book, go into that same business account because it's music services. So anything can be classified under that, and so that's what I do. I'm not when I'm paid to sing, I'm not putting that in my personal account. Any money that comes in that has anything to do with music, not just teaching, goes into my studio business account.
Great.
That seems to keep at least everything is in the same pile.
Okay. Great question. Cynthia Romoff asks, what do you feel is the threshold or trigger for taking that step into an SCorp or LLC versus your garden variety DBA? I've never done SCorp or LLC, so I can't wait to hear the answer.
So the studio I had in Colorado, and this is a good time to announce that up until January, I was running 2 music studios. The one I started in Fort Collins that was co-managed by Amy Woods, and then I came to Washington, started a new studio. And for 2 years, I had been running both studios. And doing admin for a studio where you're never actually there to hear the music and talk to the teachers and take them out to lunch, that's not fun for me. It's just crunching numbers and collecting tuition and paying teachers. And so as of January of this year, Amy Woods, a longtime teacher at the Colorado studio, she now has her own LLC, and that is her business. So when I first started that, though, because my husband and I purchased the space, the accountant advised us to do an S corporation and then an LLC for the Magnolia commercial property, which exists only to pay that mortgage. So with that, apparently that's what you do. You know, so I was my own landlord, and now I'm Amy's landlord, which I much prefer. But out here in Washington, I don't own the space I'm sitting in right now, and it seemed the easiest way to go was LLC. Now Michelle had emailed me earlier, hi Michelle, about in California, I guess LLCs are very, very expensive, and she was even checking into the possibility of incorporating in another state. And I know nothing about that, but I think there are a lot of different ways to go. I just feel like it's more professional, it is more of a business if I at least have that LLC, and it completely separates your money, your responsibility from your personal finances. If something terrible happens with the studio and it goes bankrupt, or someone sues and everything blows up with the studio, they cannot come after my personal income or take my house or kidnap my husband or anything like that. So I like having that clear boundary.
Okay.
Austin, be sure you get insurance for your studio, whether it's an LLC or S corporation, whatever, to also help you with liability.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We're going to have to do about a question a minute to pile through these. Okay. May I ask what you feel a fair commission to a studio is for a 1099 employee? The studio I teach at takes 20%, but another local studio takes approximately 65%, which I feel is abusive, this person says.
Yeah. When I first was teaching at the Arvada Center, it was a 70-30 split, and it was a 60-40 split, and the Arvada Center kept 60%, and I got 40%. I thought that was not fair. I have attended music studio business seminars. One that several of you might be familiar with is called Successful Studio Seminars, which I actually got a lot out of, and Sam Beckford runs those out of Canada, and he really opened my eyes that the industry standard is about 50-50. So typically, whatever the students are paying for tuition, the studio is keeping 50%, and the 1099 contractor is keeping 50%. In my studio, it's weighted a little heavier on the side of the 1099 teachers, but I don't feel like 50-50 is out of line. 60-40 is out of line if the studio is keeping 60%. And I do know of studios, even where I used to teach, where they would hire college students. They would be charging $50 or $60 an hour, but they would be paying the college students $20 an hour. To me, that's not fair. So the teachers I hire typically have master's degrees and quite a bit of experience, so I want to honor that. If I get someone who is really at an experienced level, a former college faculty member, I will designate them a master teacher, and they will make more.
Great. How about traveling to people's students' homes for lessons when you're a starting out teacher? How do you feel about that?
It's not a bad thing to do, and the teacher can expect to make on average $10 more an hour if they are a traveling teacher. I have traveling teachers, had traveling teachers at the Colorado studio. I have one traveling teacher here. The students still pay through the studio, but she makes a higher rate for going to those students' homes. I like this situation because I vet those people who want lessons in their homes. If I get any creepy vibes, or if a man called and wanted the cute young girl to come to his house to teach lessons, that is just not going to happen. Our lessons are full. But typically it's families and they've got other children at home and they just don't want to get out and about. And I would rather have, if someone wants to be a traveling teacher, I would rather have that teacher go to the student's home than have the parent show up in my waiting room with 4 or 5 siblings running around.
Great.
So, I mean, it's a good thing to do, I think.
So this person, the next question, they have a business license for their home studio with the city they live in, but is there any other certificate or license that she needs to teach private voice lessons out of the home, for example, with the state?
It's going to vary. It really will vary where you live. When I taught out of my home in Longmont, Colorado, I was not required to have a business license through the city. Here in Richland, Washington, I have a business license with the city. I've got a business license with the county. I have a business license with the state of Washington, and then of course I have the national. So you'll have to talk to a local small business association. And if you're not sure, every city has a small business association, and if you just Google it, you can find the right person to talk to.
Music lessons, we are still really a largely unmanaged field. I know Pilates instructors, yoga instructors, they are so much more managed but I think there are too many music, not just voice, but every piano teacher, every trumpet teacher, every violin teacher. We're really largely unregulated in a lot of ways. We get away with it.
I listed MTNA as a really valuable resource. You think of it, oh, that's just those piano teachers. It is a lot of piano teachers, but it's a lot of very organized piano teachers. And I've gotten a lot of great business strategies, pamphlets, brochures. You can buy insurance through MTNA. I mean, they have a lot of wonderful resources. And I will say, I love NATS, but MTNA, I'm happy to be a member. The discount that I get on Office Max printing from MTNA pays for my yearly membership. It's ridiculously low priced. I can get large posters printed up for like 50 cents that if I were just walking in and didn't have the MTNA discount card, that poster would cost me $2 or $3. So find out what perks are available.
Shannon Boyce asks, can you address piano skills for teachers, hiring an accompanist versus using pre-recorded tracks?
For my studio specifically, I require that my teachers have decent piano skills, and by decent I mean can they accompany during the lessons, say something like the 26 Italian songs and arias. I'm not talking about really difficult opera arias and things like that. So I accompany students during their lessons, and so do the other teachers that I've contracted. I always hire accompanists for recitals, NATS, solo and ensemble competitions. Yeah. But in studio, I just think that's a really valuable skill.
Mm-hmm. We're getting lots of questions about cancellations, absences. Why don't you just address that? It'll take care of
have a studio policy and be very clear. So not only is my studio policy on my website, so you take a look, magnoliamusicstudio.com. There's just a page, a separate tab that says studio policy. And if I did change it from 48 hours to 24 hours notice, because that just seemed to be more practical. But if someone doesn't show up for their lesson, then or it's a last-minute cancellation, they pay for that lesson. In fact, they've already paid for it with their prepaid tuition. And I have learned to not be so nice about that over the years. I used to let people take advantage of me all the time because I'm nice, but I'm not very nice when I get grumpy because I'm not being paid for lessons. Excuse me, when I'm sitting there. So,
it's true. That's true. 30 plus years I've been running my own studio too, and I still feel such guilt over it, but I've been on the other end of it. I always paid my teacher. Luckily for my students now, even if they cancel, like if I got a cancellation tonight, I have students waiting to grab it. So they rarely, but that's not the norm. That is not the norm for most teachers.
We have to train our students the way that we want to be treated. We are professionals, and we can't assume that they know that or that they know how to treat us, because they might have another teacher, maybe the piano teacher reschedules on a whim. Maybe the violin teacher says, oh, sure, we can cancel your lesson today. I know you had a lot of homework. That is not going to be my situation. And I would rather people be scheduling their extracurricular activities around their voice lessons than the other way around. And student athletes, I will just say, you probably will have to take this session of lessons off. I can't hold your spot unless you want to pay to hold it, which they don't. But I will try to find a spot for you after basketball season. And it's amazing how when you just approach it that directly, all of a sudden they figure out a way to make basketball practice and their voice lesson.
Or if they're a little under the weather and, you know, blah, 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 suddenly they're well enough and they come and have a great lesson.
Absolutely.
I think I really advise young teachers to be
on the website. Yeah, it's on the website, and I also have it printed out in the studio. There's a little stand in the lobby where the studio sheet is sitting, and I give that to each student at their first lesson. So just for I know Cynthia is our guest, but I will say on my website, I was just reminded of this. I wrote an article for Internos quite a few years ago where I talk about creative ways to handle last-minute cancellations and things like when snow days happen so that you don't lose all the money. And that was, of course, before we had Skype and whatnot. So you can find that article. We love to. She's like, where did you go? I'm plugging in my computer. There we go.
Okay. So anyway, if anybody's interested in this article, it talks about how to handle cancellation policies or snow days or creative ways to handle when they're under the weather, but they could still come to a lesson. So I talk about all of that in that article, and I'm sure and my policies are on my website as well, very clearly outlined, and I'm sure. So if we haven't answered that for you, all right, we're going to
talk about rep and things and diction and things like that, but the student can't sing.
Absolutely.
Things we can do.
Okay, so this person, do you give yourself a salary from your business account? In other words, when do you transfer funds from business to personal?
Yes, I do. I don't. I'm not paying myself because I obviously teach at my own studio. I am not paying myself per lesson. I give myself a salary, and then when I first started out, I didn't understand that I could also give myself more money. I remember in this Colorado studio, I called my accountant, and I said, I've got money in my business account, but I don't have enough money in my personal account, and I need more money. And he just laughed at me, and he said, Cynthia, it's your money. Pay yourself. And I said, well, is it salary? He said, no. He said, we call it a disbursement. Just don't worry about what it's called. Just pay yourself.
Great.
He's like, oh, yeah, it is my money.
Well,
but
Lisa, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I pay quarterly taxes on the salary.
Yeah. Lisa asks, many of my students are involved in community theater and high school productions. Often they ask me to hold their voice lesson spot for them during rehearsal season. How do you handle this?
I can't really hold that spot for them unless they're willing to pay for it for the weeks that they're not there. What I will do is I will assume that during tech week, during production week, when they're opening that weekend, I'll assume that they are going to miss that lesson. I will reschedule that one lesson. But if they can't, that's another one of those situations where if I'm not very flexible, it's amazing how many times someone will say, well, I talked to my drama director and he's going to let me out half an hour early so I can get to my lesson. I will schedule, bump those students later in my day if someone's willing to change with them, but I'm not going to hold a spot open, especially when I've got students on a waiting list.
Anne wants to know, is the 50/50 on top of studio rent or in place of?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Did you, when you were maybe talking about the 60/40 split or the...
Okay, so, well, the teachers who teach for me they're not like renting a room. Is that what you mean? Because I know some studios, like music schools or music stores, they will charge a teacher, so much per hour to rent that room. Yeah, I'm not really sure if that's what that question is about. So feel free to email me about that.
Okay, Teresa's asking, Kari, please repeat where to find KariReagan.com. My name's spelled underneath my face over there. And on my web, there's a place that says articles, and you'll find articles from Heavy Medical article on cool down research that I did to this little internet NOS article, even age-appropriate repertoire for the talented high school. So in that group of articles, you'll find one that I wrote quite a few years ago. I hope it's okay. Forgive me if it's not. But it talks about how to handle cancellations and how to set up marketing and studio and that.
I'll also ask Paul if we can make that article available in the public section of NATS. Now, several of the NATS Internos articles are untethered from the members-only site, so we might be able to share it that way too.
Okay. You're welcome, Teresa. Thank you for asking that. All right, a couple more. What do you think of offering group studio class, and how do you charge?
Yeah, I love offering group, studio class. Sorry, I was thinking voice class. No, studio class. I haven't done it here yet in Washington because I don't have the space for it, but I may just go ahead and do it and crowd 8 or 10 people in here. But we do offer studio classes at the studio in Colorado, and it is an added bonus to the lessons. There's no charge if you are currently a voice student at Magnolia Music Studio Old Town in Colorado. But you certainly could charge for that. For guests, it's $10, and I may rethink it here. I may just make a flat $10 fee for studio classes once a month here. I really like that idea for students to get practice singing for each other, and it helps so much with performance anxiety that by the time they do sing in church or they go to NATS, they've already sung that song for people other than the teacher. So I think it's a great idea. And it could bring in some nice income too.
Great. Hope asks, she just stopped teaching in a very affluent area due to too many problems with parents. She had very strict policies, but nothing worked. Do you have any thoughts for her?
I would say go back to the fall internos. I wrote an article about this exact same thing, and it's called the 4 Agreements for studio teachers. And because from being on the forums, the LinkedIn forums and Facebook, that is the #1 complaint that we have. It's not the students, it's parents, and it's this generation. And again, I go back to we need to train these parents on how to treat us as professionals, and because we deserve that respect. And then at the end of the day, one of the 4 agreements is don't take it personally, because that's when I have to remind myself, because the parents who are abusing you are probably treating a lot of people like that. So don't take it personally, but try to train the parent. Usually the student is worth dealing with the parent. Occasionally you get a family, and I haven't had that case in a long time, but occasionally if you have a family that you just don't want to deal with, then just find a way for your lessons.
Yeah. Do you believe that a technique teacher must be able to accompany their students?
You get to choose what kind of studio that you have. So if you are very focused on function and technique, and you want to hire a pianist or have the student pay for the pianist, then I think that's the absolute viable business model. You get to decide what your business model is. So just because I choose to play and I only hire contractors who can play fairly well. That's not the way everyone needs to do it. Also, if I were teaching high-level opera singers all the time, I would have an accompanist there. In Denver, I would have some opera singers who would come and work with me to get ready for the Met auditions and such. And for those lessons, they would pay extra to have the accompanist there.
At a higher level of students. Yeah. All right, we're over, but we're going to ask 2 more quick questions because these people have been so patient. If you as a teacher attend a week-long summer workshop, do you make up those lessons or you just cancel them without requiring payment for the week?
I don't do weekly lessons during the summer. Summer I do what's called flex session, and I do 6 lessons spread out, of 6 30-minute lessons spread out from June 1st to August 30th, so that I can take time that I need for professional development. Students who want more lessons than that can have that, but I don't teach every single week during the summer. So I know those weeks that I'm off attending a conference, I don't have income coming in, but it's worth it. To get that, I'm going to be a better teacher by taking those 2 weeks off. And I do think voice teachers need to find a way to give themselves some vacations and breaks, because we feel like I can't take any time off. I've just got to have this money coming in, and then you get burned out. Better to take a week off and go to a NATS workshop in the summer or a business conference and come back and be a better human being, a better teacher.
You're an inspiration to me on that. I had hip surgery a week ago and taught day, as you know, day 5, 6, and 7. So that was stupid, but I just pushed through, and I know I can. But so you're inspiring me, Cynthia, to try and find some balance in my life.
Vacation.
I'm coming your direction this week, you know. So I'll take a couple days. All right, okay, one more. How do you set up pricing to not be lesson to lesson? I've been offering one rate for single, discount for if they pay it 5 at a time, 8 at a time, 10 at a time, and this seems to help with retention. Any thoughts on that?
Again, set it up however you want. I personally don't do single lessons unless I'm working with professionals and you know, or doing audition coaching.
Right.
But other than that, my students pay for 6-week sessions. And it's a flat rate for either whether they do that as 3 60-minute lessons on alternate weeks or weekly 30-minute lessons. And I also do not discount 45-minute and hour lessons. It's your time is worth your time. So I feel like if I'm teaching a 60-minute lesson, I'm going to be making twice what I would be making if I were teaching a 30-minute lesson. It's tempting to, when you're first starting out, to give discounts for hour lessons, but as your schedule gets full, you'll realize that, oh, by discounting this hour lesson, I could be making more with 2 30-minute lessons. So just think, those are the things you need to think about. How do you want to run your business? It's great to get some ideas, but then you get to decide. This is your sandbox. You get to decide what toys to bring.
Cynthia, I'm giving you a virtual high five. We powered through. I was talking very quickly, but we did it. We ran a little bit over. Thank you, NATS Chatters, for hanging with us. I love that the Internos has this independent voice
focus, yeah.
Newsletter now, really. That should be able to help. I mean, I wish I had all of that information back in the day. It's really wonderful. So thank you for your contribution to that. And for tonight, we're getting lots of thank yous. NATS Chatters.
You all are wonderful. Email me with those questions, Cynthia Vaughn at mac.com. I will answer you.
And our April chat, I believe, is the very famous Paolo Zott, who has sung both at the Metropolitan Opera and on Broadway. It's co-sponsored by the Voice Foundation. If it's not him, it's Lisa Popeil. So I've had a rough week, and so I forgot to look at that, but it's one of those. And again, thank you all for your lovely thank yous coming in. That means a great deal to me. And Cynthia, thank you for your time tonight, your generosity.
Pleasure. You all are wonderful, and we'll see you at NATS.
Yeah, and Cynthia, you just hang on, and we're going to say goodnight to everybody, and we'll have a little quick post chat. Good night, NATS Chatters. Thank you for joining.
Bye.
Bye.
Go to sleep on the West Coast.
Yeah, no kidding. Bless their hearts.
Post. Yeah.
All right, it'll take just a second for them to offload.